they believe that there are some forces, market forces, media forces, munitions forces, and perhaps most importantly, midterms, that'll constrain the president and create a cap on how far Donald Trump may be able to go when it comes to punching back against Tehran's escalation in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz.
Earlier today, as you may be aware, the US and Iran traded airstrikes, further fracturing their ceasefire. American strikes targeted Iran's railways, disrupting Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's burial that's seen millions of mourners come to Tehran, some with banners threatening the killing of President Trump. Iran retaliated by firing ballistic missiles at an American airbase in Jordan and Kuwait. Behnam Ben Talebu is the senior director of the Iran program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and joins me again. Now, Behnam, we spoke about exactly a week ago, and I'm wondering if this is not yet a return to full-scale war. How would you characterize what we're seeing at the moment?
Well, great to be back with you. I think both sides are living in a new normal, where both sides believe they have the upper hand and both sides believe they need to signal that through the use of military force. The real outsized question is, what political aim are both sides driving towards? And one reason here in the States, as an American, I want to ring that alarm bell, is because there was a quote from an unnamed U.S. official late last night as both sides were trading blows that said that the U.S. might, slap around the Iranians a bit. I think that's the exact verbiage. But the question is, slap them around to what end? We went through a 40-day war, a 67-day ceasefire that was punctured by shooting. Now we have an MOU, and now it seems like a return to hostilities. But I don't believe it's an all-out war a la the 40 days seen starting February 28th.
Are you suggesting, Behnam, that despite all the intelligence, all the advice that the Commander-in-Chief, the President, must have at his fingertips, despite the fact that he's got this war-hungry Pete Hegseth, the leader of the Department of War, they're still not clear what the next stage is?
I believe that. I believe that is still being formed, or I believe you have more of the same. And my assessment of more of the same is that the U.S. Had been looking for cheap and easy when it comes to the Islamic Republic. Clearly, there is nothing cheap, and clearly there is nothing easy nor fast when it comes to solving the turbulent and kaleidoscopic conflicts of the Middle East. And I think the Trump administration had settled in for being willing to use military force, but to try to achieve diplomatic aims. And now, as both sides roll up their sleeves and show a greater eagerness for a return to hostilities, is there going to be a cap for those hostilities? What's driving them? And will the administration, again, use military force to try to get some sort of a new framework with Iran? And what if history repeats itself? What if we go through a cycle of violence and the Iranians double down on the Strait? Does that mean Washington will have to pivot again and ignore the military gains that it may achieve, and again have to pay to play to keep the Strait open?
Yeah, I'm just looking, Behnam, at the front page of several British newspapers for Friday. The FT, The Guardian and The Independent all showing pictures of the funeral cortege of the late Ayatollah, the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei. And you wonder why, despite the decapitation of the Iranian leadership, the ruin of their economy and fresh US strikes on their civilian infrastructure, so railways and bridges, Iran is refusing to give up control of the Strait of Hormuz or the right to exact a toll, given the fact that, the Americans can continue pounding them to kingdom come.
Well, certainly this regime believes, and forgive the pun, that is their trump card. It's their trump card not just against the United States, but also against the Gulf Arabs who export energy, and also against the international community. By escalating, by doubling down, they're trying to get more. Some would say that this is greed. Some would say that this is hubris. Some would say that this is strategy. But I will tell you that this is actually the cost of revolutionary ideology. I'm someone who was critical of the MOU, but this is a regime that, as you mentioned, is currently burying its 37-year supreme leader. And it's looking for optics wins, and it believes, just like I said earlier, that it has the upper hand despite taking that punishment. It sees survival as victory. It's been trying to spin survival as victory. And it does see the utility of military force here in trying to provoke the president and trying to assert control over this international waterway that would allow it to leverage access bilaterally against countries, insurers, shippers that do want to come and go. into this critical part of the world. And then they believe that there are some forces, market forces, media forces, munitions forces, and perhaps most importantly, midterms, that'll constrain the president and create a cap on how far Donald Trump may be able to go when it comes to punching back against Tehran's escalation in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz.
And Behnam, if that's their calculation, how thoughtful is it, how serious is it, or how delusional is it, do you think?
Well, I do believe it is born of revolutionary ideology, so I don't want to say it's delusional, but it is, an irrational person can use rational means and proceed logically aligned ways and means to achieve an end that is irrational. So, we're seeing them right now understand where their leverage is. Their leverage is not necessarily with their missile force and drone force, but it is in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. So they're sticking to it. And they see this as a battle of survival. And even their engagement tells this story. Their diplomatic engagement, in my view, is less about cash in the short term than it is about survival. Everything is about time, looking to find a way to make sure that Donald Trump spends his time trying to write and rewrite U.S. strategy and tactics here and not be able to align ways, means, and ends on his side. And that's why it's critical, I think, to look at what the U.S. is striking as it begins to resort to force. Is it trying to signal a broader infrastructure war? Will it begin to target political leadership? Will it unleash the intelligence community? Will it unleash the Israelis? These are all questions that the regime is willing to gamble on right now, because despite it being less capable, that ideological boon, that debate over irrationality, is at least leading it in the short term to act like it's more confident.
And talking of irrationality, Behnam, David, one of my listeners, thinks I've asked a bizarre question. He says the US signed a peace deal which gave Iran control of the strait. What a bizarre question. To what extent did that MOU, well, if you can call it a peace deal, that's to listener David, to what extent did it give Iran control of the strait? Because that's not what I understood. I don't think the Americans stood that either. Could the Iranians have believed that they had control of the strait as a result of that MOU?
Well, there is a debate over the clause. It's worth remembering that this is a 1.5-page deal, 14 points. There is a debate over the clause that governs the strait. Americans are treating it as a return to normal. The Iranians are treating it as a way to carve out an entirely new sea lane. And it's not just about what they believe and what they think and what they say, but what their behavior shows. What they've been trying to do with the crisis since the blockade, since the MOU, and even with respect to their use of force, is to try to force shippers to have to sign up with this new authority they've created, the Persian Gulf Transit Authority. I may have the acronym wrong. To try to get insurance from them and try to use Iranian territorial waters, or either risk going through a minefield or having to turn off their transponders. And if ships do the opposite, which is to go through the southern route near Oman, preferred by the U.S., previously protected by the U.S., then they will get hit. And so there is a real difference of interpretation over the clause in this limited deal, which I concur with you is not a peace deal, that governs as to what does traffic through the Strait of Hormuz look like. And this is America and Iran negotiating with bombs and bullets rather than at the negotiating table with words and with pieces of paper.
Right, and this MOU, the signing of it, gave both the US and Iran 60 more days during which they were going to hammer out more details. And I'm just wondering, given that bombs are being traded across the sky and hitting the ground, what can they possibly be talking about behind the scenes? Because I understand conversations are still ongoing.
Conversations are still ongoing, and that is really one of the most unique elements of Trump Term 2 when it comes to policy towards Tehran. It's possible to do many of these things at the exact same time. Talk and shoot, move from pressure to engagement. The president is very comfortable using military means to try to get to a diplomatic end, and he's resetting the deck here. But so too, we have to say, are the Iranians, and clearly in the region, and clearly against America, and even against Israel, the threshold for the use of force has dropped. So I want to stress this again. Despite the military gains made by Israel and America, there is still a confidence boon in the mind of the leadership of the Islamic Republic, what's left of it today, which means that we're probably going to need to buckle up, because there'll be more, not less, violence in this region in the short to medium term.
All right, Behnam, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Timed Radio. That's Behnam Ben Talebu.